The Tennessee Titans finished the 2025 NFL season 3-14, but in the offseason, they have made some awesome changes. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Tennessee Titans and why I personally believe they are one of the most improved teams in the NFL. Hit the like and subscribe button if you're new and going to enjoy. Let's have some fun. So as we all know, the 2025 season for the Tennessee Titans was going to be a rough year no matter what. There's just a lot of things that were going against this team heading into the season. Obviously, the coaching staff, a rookie quarterback, and a roster that in general wasn't very good. But the biggest thing that did happen last year and the biggest reason for optimism moving forward is the progression of their young quarterback. Cam Ward, obviously, first overall pick. And I thought, you know what? I really think that he did a decent job surviving what was a pretty horrendous situation. And I love to see the fact that he got better as the year progressed. You can see, he wasn't bad to start the year off. He definitely had some games where he was really promising, like the game versus the Raiders, even the game versus the Patriots at 255 yards. But you can see he had a stretch here between weeks, I guess this is week 3 to like wherever this is, where he had an interception each game. Then following that, in the final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games of the season, he only threw one single interception. You can also see his sack numbers also dropped a little bit too from that kind of, glut of tough defenses and opponents that were just difficult. As the year progressed, he played fairly well. Hell, even versus the Texans, I thought, decent production. Seattle, decent production. San Francisco, Kansas City, even, Jacksonville, the first game, not so much, but still. There's reasons for hope about Cam Ward. Now, I have heard there's been some reports out there that, Cam Ward hasn't been good this offseason. I would just say in general, don't pay attention to anything you hear about training camp or rookie mini camp or OTAs. For the most part, I don't care about practice reports because 99% of the time, they don't really mean anything to your roster. And practices for me are where you can get rid of some of your flaws. So if you're making mistakes in practice, that is, to me, better than doing it in the actual games. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I'm a Cowboys fan, and I remember a few years ago, Dak Prescott was on every single Twitter page and Instagram page of, Dak is throwing interceptions like crazy. And then he goes into the season and had one of his best seasons of his entire career. I think that was 2023 when he was the runner-up for MVP. So for me, I don't really care or give a damn about what is being said at practice. The only thing I really care about is who stays healthy, who gets hurt, and maybe what do the rookies look like? That's really about it. So I don't really care about the whole Cam Ward reports. I think Cam Ward showed a lot in his rookie season, despite the fact that his head coach got fired, despite the fact that his team was complete dog shit, let's be honest. He still looked like an NFL quarterback, and I would feel very good about him long-term for this team. But as I said in the intro, this team has made a lot of changes this offseason. Obviously, it starts off with Robert Saleh, free agency, the NFL draft. Let's go ahead and start talking about what moves they made, and then along the way, we'll talk about Robert Saleh. Let us begin with free agency. This was a team that had a lot of money to spend, and a lot of money was spent. So let's just start from the top here. Hendon Hooker, Mitchell Trubisky. I like the addition of Trubisky. Get yourself sort of that veteran in the room who can, I don't want to say guide Cam Ward, but, be that veteran that Cam can go to if any questions are asked. Michael Carter, Julius Chestnut, Lance McCutcheon, nothing too big there. KJ Osborne is a solid wide receiver 3/4. Wan'Dale Robinson, we'll get to that here in a second. We'll talk more about it. Some tight end moves, some offensive line moves, the big trade for Jermaine Johnson, the big move for John Franklin Myers, and then obviously the 3 big additions to your secondary: Cordell Flott, Alontae Taylor, and Joshua Williams. So a lot to get to here. Let's start off with the move for wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson has been a steadily improving player, and last year for the Giants was really his first major breakout season. And what the Titans struggled with last year is they had a wide receiver core that struggled to be consistent. Calvin Ridley's been up and down, honestly, since his days at Atlanta. He's been quite up and down. Feels like ever since the suspension, really. And by the way, Calvin Ridley is also an older player, too. He's not that young guy that a lot of us think he is. He's still very old. So you had Calvin Ridley, who was very up and down. And then you had your 2 rookie wide receivers in Shamir Dike and Eleke Omener, who were, if I'm not mistaken, day 3 picks that were being asked to play a big role on offense. And that was just pretty unfair to ask of those guys to be super impactful. And to be honest with you, I was actually quite impressed with what we did get out of, Shamir Dike, especially on special teams, and his overall impact on the roster. And of course, Eleke Omener looks to be a pretty promising young player that could do some things out there on the field. So even though I didn't love like targeting Wan'Dale Robinson, like for me, there was better receivers out there on the market. But if you were sitting there saying we don't want to overspend on our Romeo Dobbs, or we don't want to get into the George Pickens sweepstakes or things like that, going after a Wan'Dale does make some sense, especially when you do look at the other moves they made at wide receiver this offseason. Adding Wan'Dale actually does make a lot of sense. And what I do like about the deal is that only $38 million of it is guaranteed. So that means less than half the contract is guaranteed. And if he goes out there in year 1 or year 2, gets either hurt or just doesn't have the connection that you think he could have with Cam Ward, then you don't have to owe him this $1 billion to, get off the deal. Like, you can get off the deal pretty easily. So I think it's a pretty safe win now move. He's definitely somebody that is still young, and yeah, he's got some flaws, like just the fact that he's really short and stuff like that. But as a pure slot receiver who's gotten better every single year, that can provide some consistency and stability to the room, I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now let's go ahead and talk about the defensive line moves. Jermaine Johnson, who they traded in exchange for T'Vondre Sweat, and John Franklin Myers on a 3-year, $63 million deal. Two very interesting moves, especially when you pair that up with what they did at the back end of round 1, which we'll talk about here in a second. This is a defensive line last year that was okay. Obviously, last year they did draft that the UCLA guy, Aladejo, who really didn't do a ton last year for this team. And so you're sitting with this defensive line that, they have a couple pieces here and there, but nothing great. And well, obviously outside of Jeffrey Simmons. And so what they did this offseason, pairing Jeffrey Simmons up there with a John Franklin Myers, who John Franklin Myers, is kind of in that middle-aged territory. It's a 3-year deal, and I think you're getting out of the contract by the time that I think Franklin will be starting to decline heavily, because John Franklin Myers is 29 years old. By the time the contract's up, he'll be about 32, so perfect. It's a lot of money to be paid. Fortunately, only 42 of it is guaranteed, so this might be another one of these deals where the first 2 years are guaranteed, and then the 3rd year, not so much. But I think he's a great fit next to a Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, we're talking about two big, versatile, strong against the run, good against the pass-like players. And John Franklin Myers brings that winning mentality that he had there with the Denver Broncos now over to the Tennessee Titans, so I like the move. As for Jermaine Johnson is just somebody that has to stay on the field. When he is healthy, he is an impactful player. Good against the run, can give you some solid power rush reps against the pass. I don't love giving up T'Vondre Sweat because T'Vondre, to me, while he is a very flawed player, he's very big. Conditioning is always a factor for him. Injuries have been a factor for him as well. But I don't really love the idea of trading a super young, talented player for a middle-aged, injury-prone player in his own right. That all said, though, I think when you add the context of you already have Jeffrey Simmons and you just added John Franklin Myers, it is a bit easier to stomach. And I do think edge rusher was a massive need. So adding Jermaine Johnson is going to be a very interesting fit for this team. And I do think you have a very strong, powerful defensive line, and then when we talk about the draft, you added on to that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Really quickly on the secondary. I'm not like the highest on Flott, Alante, nor Joshua Williams, but this was a secondary that obviously invested into L'Jarius Sneed, and he was a complete flop for this team. And so you had to reset the room in some ways, and reset they did. Cordell Flott, 3 years, $45 million, with only 32 of it being fully guaranteed. Alante Taylor, 3-year deal worth $60 million, with 42 of it being guaranteed. And then Josh Williams also signed a 2-year deal. This seems to be like another pretty similar type of signing to the John Franklin Myers signing, where the first, I would assume, 2 years are basically mostly guaranteed. And then that last year, not so much. So you're really giving this defense, 2 years to kind of prove their worth, especially within the secondary. Cordell Flott had a pretty promising year last year for the Giants. He's been a very up and down player at times, but he's still young. He still is that versatile piece that can play on the inside and on the outside. So I don't hate it. And again, only having 30 of it being guaranteed, it's more of like a 2-year guaranteed deal. So interesting. Alante Taylor, I thought his best reps were when he was playing inside the slot, so I would assume he's going to play that for this Titans team. He's bigger, longer, pretty good athlete, and $60 million is a lot of money, but 42 of it being guaranteed basically means you're paying him $20 million the next 2 years, and then we'll see what happens in year 3. I will say I do think that those were two overpays for two players that I'm not quite yet sold on, but if you are the Titans and you probably were having to outbid other players or other teams because you just don't have the pool that some of those other teams could have, I think it does check some boxes. And again, corner was one of their biggest needs, and they did address it. And then Joshua Williams, I think, was on like a 2-year, I think it was $10 million or something like that. He's kind of a big swing. He's had promising flashes for the Chiefs, but never really became that full-time starter. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see what they can get out of him. All in all, I do think that their offseason was a quite productive journey, to say the least. Also, Jacob Martin had a pretty impressive year last year. More of a rotational body, but still, I like that move. Cordo Volson, Austin Schlottman, kind of depth options, I feel like, on the offensive line. All in all, like, I'm not going to give their free agency an A or an A+, but I think it was a solid, like, B+. They got upgrades in certain positions, and for the most part, they stayed relatively young. Let us now move over to the 2026 draft, where things got shaken up quite early with the move for Carnell Tate. Wide receiver Carnell Tate at 4, Keldrick Falk at 31, Anthony Hill at 60, Fernando Carmona at 142, Nick Singleton at 155, Jackie Marshall 184, Pat Coogan 194, and Jaron Kanak at 225. This was a very interesting draft class. I'm going to focus mainly on the top 3. So really quickly, Fernando Carmona, I think, is a solid football player, but I think he's going to be more of a depth option for this team. Nick Singleton has some real speed, has some real strength, some real athleticism, but for the position, he just doesn't see the field very well. So I do wonder if him learning from a Tony Pollard could be good for him, but I do think he's going to be more of a stash and might be more of a special teams guy early in his career. Jackie Marshall has a ton of potential, good size, good length, shows a little bit of burst here and there, has to work the mechanics out, has to get a little bit better fundamentally, but there's a lot to like about this guy. You also just have to figure out, like, where does he fit on your defense, but interesting player. I liked Pat Coogan a lot coming out of college. I didn't think he was a starter year 1 or anything like that, but to get this guy in the middle of round 6, I think is great value. He's a really solid player. He's smart. He's big. He's got the size profile, and he played for Indiana, so I don't think you could go wrong there. I don't think he'll be a starter anytime soon, but, you know, let him stash and see if he can become something. I don't hate it. And then Jaron Kanak, I did not get to his film. So top 3, though. Carnell Tate, let's start with that one. Such an interesting pickup here, because Carnell Tate, for me, was my wide receiver 3 in this year's draft class. I did like Mekhi Lemon more, and I did love Jordan Tyson, but I still did like Carnell Tate. And I always thought that if he was the wide receiver 1 in this class, that he was going to be a good player wherever he did end up landing. He's got a nice frame. He's got the length, the size, the catch radius. He's a wizard downfield. Like, some of the catches he made downfield were really impressive. And there really isn't like a bunch of like major flaws to him. Like, he's not really good with the ball in his hands. I don't think he offers a ton of versatility. Like, I think he's a true outside wide receiver. So he's an interesting player. Again, is the type of player that I'm taking at 4? No, not for me. But I think in this draft class, with how kind of lackluster it was in some positions, I think going after a Carnell Tate does make some sense. I mean, going after an Ohio State receiver has proven to be the right decision for a lot of teams. And even if Carnell doesn't ever become that true number 1 option, I think worst case scenario, he could be a really good Robin to maybe your eventual Batman, kind of like what he was last year for Jeremiah Smith. You had Jeremiah Smith and you had Carnell Tate, 1A, 1B. I think Carnell Tate could potentially be that 1B, or, you know, if things go right, maybe the 1A on this team. I just think he's a little limited as a number 1 option, just because I haven't seen the reps of him being the number 1. But again, Ohio State wide receiver, big size, big frame, good catch radius. Interesting. Then Keldrick Falk in the back of round 2. I think they traded up to get back into this pick. I think it was a short trade up, but still, they really wanted Keldrick Falk. This was an interesting one because Keldrick is such an interesting prospect in terms of, like, the fan consensus was that this was an absolute bum. This is somebody that should not have been on a football field because, oh, he's this tweener who doesn't get a lot of sack production and this and that. But I was always somebody, I think I started off lower on Keldrick, but then by the time that everyone just hated and piled on the guy, I was kind of like, I think we're overhating him a little bit. Like, let's give him some grace, and I still stand on that. He's big, he's long, he's lengthy, he's got some really good reps against the run, and you know what, like, as a pass rusher, there is a ceiling to get to. He's not close to that ceiling. He's still kind of in the middle of his floor and ceiling right now, but he can end up becoming a decent pass rusher, like somebody who ends up getting around 6 to 8 sacks a season while being a good run defender and offering some versatility as like a, you know, interior defensive lineman that can play next to Jeffrey Simmons and John Franklin Myers, and maybe at times flex out to play some outside linebacker here and there. He's just kind of that interesting body where he can survive at both spots and thrive in both spots. I think he'll be better playing on the interior, but again, playing on the outside, I think he could also do. I just think this was a good pickup, but an interesting fit just because I just think that this team needed more of that, like, true go-getter off the edge, like that true pass rusher. But if you just want to build a defensive line that has some versatility, some size, some power to it, like Keldrick Falk kind of fits the fold. I just worry about, can he get after the quarterback early in his career But, you know, if you want to stash him for a little bit and let him learn, I think it's a good idea. Anthony Hill in round 2. You guys can see my little Texas Longhorn Funko Pop. You guys know I'm a Texas Longhorns fan. I thought Anthony Hill was a very, very good prospect. I thought that round 2 is about the sweet spot for him. He's a really intriguing player, right? The size profile, the athleticism profile, some of the reps you see in coverage are really enticing. He's got sort of a blitzing ability to him that's also intriguing. He had a lot of sacks in his sophomore and junior year, not so much as they didn't deploy him in that way, but he has a lot of things going for him. I think he has to be a little bit more physical versus the run. I think adding on a little bit more power and muscle to his frame. And one thing we know about Robert Saleh is that he is one of, if not the best defensive coordinators at getting the absolute most out of his linebackers. And so for Anthony Hill, playing on a defensive line that has John Franklin Myers, Jeffrey Simmons, Keldrick Falk, Jermaine Johnson, and all those guys, I think for Anthony Hill, it's going to be really nice for you because you're going to be able to kind of roam a little bit more free and clean in that linebacker spot. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if they deploy Anthony Hill a little bit off the edge as well, because I think with his body type and his length and size and his athleticism, he might be able to give you a little bit as like a speed rusher if he can learn a couple little moves here and there. Like I just think Anthony Hill is just gonna be a really fun weapon for this defense. And you already had a Cedric Gray in this role or in the linebacker spot, but getting somebody with a little bit more range and athleticism and a ton of potential, I thought it was excellent. So again, kind of like their free agency. I wasn't like A+, this is the best thing ever, but I really did like some of the moves they made. And I thought, again, these were moves that got them better, right? I think they added some depth here in day 3. I think they added some impact guys in day 1. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet, Robert Saleh. You bring Robert Saleh in, a former New York Jets head coach, former 49ers defensive coordinator. One thing we can say about Saleh, even if he never was able to find success in New York, the one thing we can definitely say about him, he was able to build some really, really good defenses in New York, and of course last year San Francisco. He's to me, one of the best defensive minds in the game, arguably the best defensive mind in the game. I think that is pretty fair to say. Well, let me rephrase that. I think Jesse Minter, and I do think Mike McDonald is a little better than him, but he's in the conversation undoubtedly. And now you put him on a team that has a lot of talent defensively, and the one thing that does give me more hope for him this time around than what happened with the New York Jets is that he actually has his quarterback. I mean, he had Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and a whole bunch of dog shit for many years there in New York. But heading into a team in Tennessee that already has that franchise quarterback in Cam Ward, I'm sure was probably half the selling point for him to join that team. So, you know, I think Robert Saleh should be in for a better tenure this time around. I think he has his quarterback. I think he has a lot of good talent around him. I think he had a direct say into what this team did defensively. And so I think just having Robert Saleh in there alone will turn around this defense to be one of the better units in the league. Maybe not instantly, but as time goes on. And offensively, they have the ceiling of a Cam Ward and all these other guys to look forward to. So I like that move quite a bit. Because last year, I mean, their coaching staff was just bad heading into the season. I think Saleh, while not proven, I do think is a proven defensive mind that has, in my opinion, chops to be a good overall head coach. Now, really quickly, let's go ahead and look at what their 2026 schedule looks like. Again, don't forget 3-14 last year, so anything over 3 wins would be an improvement for this team. You got the Jets week 1, the Eagles week 2, the Giants, Ravens, Texans, Colts, Browns, and Bengals. Okay, so pretty promising bye week here, right smack dab in the middle of the season. I think that's honestly very good. Jets game is very winnable for this team. I think Eagles, Ravens, Texans, and maybe Colts, Bengals are going to be tough ones, but I think you can beat the Jets. I think the Giants is kind of a toss-up. I think the Browns is a toss-up as well. And if you can upset the Bengals, the Colts, maybe the Eagles, if the Eagles are struggling early, like there is a pathway to being 3-5, 4-4 through week 8. I'm going to say, you know, 2-6 is also very possible too if you just come out the gate slow, but I'm going to say 3-5 looks about right for me. I'm not saying you're going to beat the Jets, Giants, and the Browns. Like these are the 3 games you're going to win. But if you can go 2-3 in that stretch there and then upset one of these favorite teams, maybe the Bengals or the Colts, that's 3-5 and you've already matched your season total last year. So I think 3-5 is possible. I think 4-4 is also possible too. Post bye week, you got Jacksonville, Dallas, Jacksonville, Washington, Detroit, Indy, Raiders, Steelers, Texans. So a little bit harder after the bye week than before the bye week, but Jacksonville, like these are 2 tough ones. Maybe if you can split them, that'd be nice, but I'm not going to bank on that one. I also think Dallas is just going to be too good of an offense for this team to beat, but Dallas can slip up. They've done that before. Washington is also interesting. They're just kind of a team that I don't really know what to do with right now. If they're healthy, they look good, but a lot of new faces. Is it going to work? Detroit, tough one. Indy, if you could split the Indianapolis games, I think that would be pretty big. Raiders is a winnable game. Steelers, we'll see where they're at week 17 and who's healthy and what that team looks like, but that should be a tough one. And then Texans in week 18. Maybe the Texans are benching their starters in that game. That's a potential right there. So I said 3-5 to start the year off. I'm looking at what they have here, and I think 6 wins is possible. Especially if you do go 4-4 in your first week 8s, because I think the first half of your season is a little bit lighter than your second half. I think your second half does get a little bit harder. The good news is for this team is they do avoid Seattle. They do avoid the Los Angeles Rams. They avoid the Chargers. They avoid the Bills. They don't avoid the Ravens, but I think that is a tough one right there. But you avoid a lot of the major teams in the NFL. The Niners, you avoid that entire division, which is good. So I'm thinking like 6 wins, maybe 7, but it's also like it could be 5 as well. I think for this upcoming season, it's another building year. I think last year was a complete depressing, just what was that type of season? 3-14. It was brutal. One of the worst offenses, one of the worst defenses. I think this year you've improved so much in both ways that I could easily see you doubling your win total from last year, going from 3 wins to 6, 7. 8 feels a little bit too much for me right now. But if you're saying over under 6, I'll maybe take the over. Right, if you're saying 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins, I think 6 or 7 is very possible. But yeah, Titans fans, let me know in the comment section below, how many games are you going to win in the 2026 NFL season? If you guys are new here, hit that like and subscribe button. We're on the road to 25,000. We just hit 20K like 2 days ago. Appreciate you guys. 25K though is next up on the horizon. So subscribe if you're new here. And yeah, Titans fans, lots to look forward to. So hopefully I'll see you guys around. Have a good day. Love you guys. Peace.